This is the Polygon 7 by Daring Run, an interesting XT concept take on the 65%. Additional keys were added to either side to forge form with function while keeping the symmetry alive. At a price of just $109, the Polygon 7 is the perfect step up for those that want to explore custom space from something like a Rainy or ND. Welcome back to the channel, guys. This is Scott K. In my opinion, keyboards like the Polygon 7, they play a crucial part in the overall balance of the mechanical keyboarding hobby. While you enter the hobby with the likes of, the entry-level pre-builds, right? Like the Rainy or the ND75 and so on, you will eventually graduate from that and move on to something more with more customization. Something that you need to actually build. That's where the likes of the QK, the Zoom, the JRIS series await you at the gates of the rabbit hole. While the Polygon 7 is not a traditional layout per se, it essentially bridges the gap between a compact 65% and the larger TKL. The amount of keys that the Polygon 7 actually has is very close to something like a FRL TKL. The difference being the symmetry, obviously. I can tell you, starting at $109, the Polygon 7 has the looks, the features, and the typing performance to safely be considered as that next step up. Plus, the Polygon 7 is an in-stock keyboard. So let's get started. So let's actually start with the design and layout of the Polygon 7. As shown earlier, the Polygon 7 is essentially a take on a 65% XT concept. Foundationally, it's a 65%, but has these extra keys right here to add more function to an otherwise fairly compact layout, right? And rather than putting the keys on one side, they did split it up to create this nice synergy that is actually pleasing to my eyes. What's interesting is that in addition to the sockets for the keys, Polygon 7 also features these buttons. What are they? Well, they're pretty much whatever you want them to be. So the keyboard came with these buttons mapped to home and end, in the default configuration at least for me, but you can turn these into volume up and down, delete, mute, or whatever you want and set it to whatever you want by via. While the overall design of the Polygon 7 is clean, right? It does have this design complexity that you can see from the outside. This layered wave design does give this keyboard some nice flair and also some character. But wait, the true beauty of this keyboard actually lays below. The Polygon 7 features a very nicely detailed machined and PBD'd stainless steel weight. Not only does this add to the overall heft of the keyboard, this actually comes out to about 4 pounds when it's fully built. It also provides this visual cue that really elevates the overall look of the keyboard and also increases the overall premium valueness of it. The machining is actually quite done well, and the mirror finish is done tastefully also. So the version I have, the color is called anno gray because it's anodized. However, you do have choice of 5 different colors overall. Let's explore the additional features of the case now, shall we? Okay, so the Polygon 7 has 2 great features that I really love. First, it's the ball and catch toolless assembly mechanism. This is a very secure assembly method that really helps to reduce the overall time required to assemble the case with screws otherwise. In addition, you have these, right? Yes, the magnetic connectors. This is actually one of my favorite features of late, where you don't really have to fumble with the ribbon cables or anything like that during the overall build process. They could be a little finicky and whatnot, so this really eliminates that. Okay, so let's move on to some of the components too. First of all, the plates. So you have 3 plate options when choosing the Polygon 7. In order of stiffness right here, let's say you got the aluminum, which technically is the stiffest out of these 3, then you have FR4, which is the mid-level, and finally polypropylene, which is very soft. What was kind of funny is that because of the multiple segments this keyboard has, the plate also comes in 3 pieces. The one major one in the middle and 2 tiny little baby ones. While you do have tabs here on the plates, this is if you want to actually top mount this keyboard. If you want to go gasket, this keyboard is mounted via the PCB. It's a PCB gasket mount. Speaking of PCB, right? Let's take a look at this. So you have the option of going with like the thinner type, right? The thin flexi cut also 1.2mm flexible PCB, or the standard and solid 1.6mm. So I have both here. You can also opt for the solder version if you choose, and that comes in 1.6. As you can see, if you do go with the 1.2mm, you do have quite a bit of individual cuts, which will add to the overall flex of this already flexible PCB. The 1.6 version is more standard, and both feature a usual, the KL style hotspot sockets in south-facing configuration. As mentioned before, if you do decide to mount this via gasket, this keyboard will actually be PCB mounted, which also means that if you choose to, you can go plateless, especially a good option with the solder PCB. So gaskets. You do have option of going with two different ones. The gray one is a bit fatter and softer in my opinion, and the black one is a little bit slimmer and it was a little bit harder too. Honestly, I didn't really feel that big of a difference between these two in real use, so you know what, choose whichever you want. As expected, the PCB is actually wireless capable with both Bluetooth and 2.4 GHz wireless. The PCB is also programmable with VL2, which is also very nice, and obviously you have the macro portion as well as the buttons that you could program. And yes, you do get a lot of foam honestly, but this is one of those keyboards that do come with it, but you really don't need any of it, and that's something we can discuss later. Okay, so let's go into the overall build process. I want to show you this in two different ways. One, a classic method in top mount and foamless also, and one with gasket and all the foam. The sound profile of the builds are dramatically different for this keyboard, so it's up to you to decide what's kind of right for you, right? So for the first build, we'll be going with all the foams. Well, everything except the PE foam. For the plate, I'm going to be selecting the softest option here. I feel like this is probably how most people are going to go with, the polypropylene plate, right? For this build, I wanted to go with an interesting set of switches, so I chose a DK Ice Latte switches. So these switches are made of polycarbonate housing, both top and bottom, with a palm stem. The switch also features a heavyish spring with a 55-gram bottom out, but they actually do feel pretty heavy. And they're overall a deep and subdued sound signature. So let's see how this fares with this keyboard. Between the two gaskets, I am actually going to go with the softer gray one since why not, right? The magnetic connection really helps to speed up the overall build process here. Finally, for keycaps, I'm going with a set of Dolch Keycaps, which I felt like it did a really good job of matching the overall gray aesthetic of the Polygon 7, and the colors do match pretty well. This is the result. I'm really enjoying the look of the gray on gray with a little bit of red accenting because I felt like it was a little drab otherwise, so this overall looks really nice to me. With everything in, I really do enjoy how symmetrical this keyboard looks. So with all the soft bits in, how does this keyboard feel? Well, as you'd expect, the keyboard does have a soft and bouncy nature to it, and it's a comfortable typing experience, right? Couple that with a fairly low 18mm front case height, the Polygon 7, it's a good keyboard to type on. What about the sound? Well, let's find out. Okay, so somewhat expected from the setup, right? It's a fairly subdued sounding board in this configuration. I credit that to the thin 1.2mm PCB. When you have a keyboard like this that mounts directly to the PCB and is full of flex cuts, even with the foam, you may end up with like a quieter sounding keyboard, as we see here. Perhaps that's what you're looking for? If not, then let's take a look at another option, right? So the classic build. I'm going to be building this one with the top mount route, and this I'm going to also be using the aluminum plate, trying to keep it classic. In addition, I will also be using no foam here at all. I'm going to take everything out. You really don't need it with this keyboard. So just bare keyboard with the classic aluminum plate and no flex cut 1.6mm PCB. The interesting thing is that while the main plate mounts to the case via top mount, the side little ones, they'll remain gasket mounted. So I think that's just the design of this keyboard. Okay, so same switches, same keycaps, but how does this impact everything else? Well, as you'd expect, the keyboard will become stiffer. There are some softer top mount keyboards out there, but maybe also with the plate combination. But this one, especially with the aluminum plate, is on the firmer side, as you can see. It does use these like plastic spacers, so make sure that you install these when you're also building up yours. But what about the sound? Yep, if you're going to go for sound, this is definitely the setup you should be going for. Wow, the sound is like night and day difference. While the thin PCB gasket mount was very subdued in my opinion, the top mount with a thicker PCB is much more prominent. While some keyboards don't really change that much, even with the different mounting styles. I'm actually looking at you, Zoom 65 V3. I'm glad that the Polygon actually does change quite a bit, depending on what kind of options you choose. So you got into this hobby with something like a Rainy 75 or ND 75, which are great options, but you want to explore something a little bit more advanced. A nice keyboard with great features and that doesn't break the bank like some of these really expensive group buy ones. Well, it's a good day for you. In addition to like the great options you have with like the QKs, the Neos, the Zoom, the JRIS boards, well even the latest Divinity Key TESS. You got another one now. The interesting thing though about this one, the Polygon 7, is that unlike some of those other boards out there, they decided to take a different approach, a more fun and unique design and also layout. So if you're looking for a solid option for around $109 starting and want something that stands out from the rest of the crowd out there, you cannot go wrong with the Polygon 7. Plus, it's in stock, so you don't really have to wait for a group buy or even a pre-order, right? So as usual, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and I'll have more content for you in the future. Thanks.